Savo Reserve, late afternoon. A lion limps out of the scrub, his front leg dragging unnaturally across the hard-packed earth. Dust lifts in small puffs beneath each uneven step, clinging to the torn flesh along his side. His mane is dark and matted, streaked with old blood and soil. He does not roar. He does not growl. He walks with the slow, uncertain rhythm of something no longer certain of its place in the wild. The patrol jeep stops just 20 feet ahead, engine idling low. No one speaks. Inside, 3 rangers sit frozen, eyes trained on the lion's movements. Elijah, seated behind the wheel, lifts a hand instinctively toward the gear stick, but doesn't shift. The lion isn't charging. He isn't even alert. He's limping forward on instinct alone, eyes half-lidded, body trembling from hips to shoulder. He pauses near a fever tree and leans against it briefly, ribs pushing through skin with each breath. One ear twitches, following the distant call of guinea fowl, but he doesn't turn. Instead, he steps forward again, toward the road, toward the vehicle. Elijah lowers the window. "That's not right," he says quietly, almost to himself. The lion crosses into the open, leaving behind the brittle brush and its weak shade. Each movement sends another thread of blood trailing down his flank, a long, dark smear drawing across his fur. There are no visible snares, no wires caught around his limbs. The injury looks torn, almost ripped, likely from another lion. A fight. Maybe over territory, maybe over a female. The wild doesn't offer explanations, only aftermath. He reaches the edge of the path and stops. Dust settles around his paws. The patrol jeep remains still, its metal frame catching the heat of the sun. For a long moment, no one moves. The lion's head droops low, almost brushing the ground. His breathing is audible now. Short, staggered, like wind through cracked reeds. Then, without warning, he lowers himself. Not to pounce, not to prepare, but to collapse. It happens in sections. First the front limbs, trembling and unsure, then the rear, folding beneath him like broken scaffolding. His body slumps onto the dry earth with a dull thud. The dust rises once more, softer this time, settling over his mane and muzzle. The jeep doors stay closed. Elijah leans forward, watching for signs of alertness, aggression, confusion. But the lion doesn't react. His chest moves slowly. His eyes remain open but unfocused. "He's not warning us," whispers one of the younger rangers. "He's asking." No one replies. The silence stretches long and uncertain. From behind the lion, a trail of smeared paw prints and scattered blood marks his journey. Less than 50 meters from the brush to the road, but it might as well have been a mile. Every trace in the dirt speaks of effort, of decision. What made him come here, to the humans? Desperation doesn't follow instinct. It overrides it. Elijah picks up the radio and speaks quietly to base, reporting the situation with as much detail as calm allows. Injured male lion, possible puncture wounds, extreme fatigue, likely dehydration, unprovoked approach, unusual behavior. Distance to base, 90 minutes. Response time, uncertain. The lion doesn't move during the transmission. Not when Elijah speaks, not when the radio clicks off. Only his ears shift now and then, tracking sound. His tail lies still. They could drive off. Wait for reinforcements from a safer location, but if they do, the lion might not live. The heat will take him, or another scavenger will find him. If he runs, he dies. If they wait, he might live. The minutes stretch. The jeep radiates heat from its sides. The lion remains at the wheel's edge, not touching, not growling, just breathing. A vulture circles once overhead, then again. The lion doesn't react. He is no longer a threat. The decision comes without discussion. Elijah opens the door slowly and steps down. The lion lifts his head half an inch, then lets it fall. No growl, no tension in the body, only breath and weight. Elijah takes 3 slow steps forward and stops. He doesn't reach out, don't kneel. He simply stands, watching the slow rise and fall of the lion's chest. Behind him, the other rangers stay seated. One holds the field kit ready but makes no move to bring it forward. The lion blinks. Once, then again. His body doesn't shift. His wounds weep softly into the dirt. Above them, the sky begins to pale toward evening. Light stretches long across the road, casting shadows that flicker between man and animal. There are no roars here, no chases, no kills, only the quiet collapse of something proud, now softened by pain, and the gentle, careful weight of men who were never meant to be this close. The lion does not rise again. Not yet, but he does not close his eyes either. He stays, and so they do too. The lion lay still beside the front tire, ribs lifting slowly beneath the dust that had settled over his flanks. His front leg, the one that dragged, now sprawled outward at an unnatural angle, paw twisted slightly inward. A thin line of blood continued to seep from the gash along his side, collecting into a dark patch that soaked the earth beneath him. His tail twitched once, weakly, then nothing. Elijah remained standing a few feet away, not daring to kneel. His boots sunk slightly into the brittle topsoil as he shifted his weight, eyes never leaving the lion's chest. Each breath was slow, uneven, as if every inhale required negotiation. The sun had edged lower, though the heat still clung to everything. Cicadas filled the silence, their hum constant. Around the lion's wounds, the first flies had already begun to settle, attracted by the smell of blood and heat. They clung to the torn fur and open flesh, moving in slow spirals. The lion didn't bother to flick them off. Elijah lifted the radio again, voice low but steady. He's down, still breathing, but shallow. Flies are gathering. We can't move him. Can't leave him either. A crackle returned. The base would relay the coordinates, but the nearest mobile unit was almost 3 hours away. Road conditions were poor, and daylight was fading. The ranger's jaw tightened. They didn't have 3 hours, not at this pace. Inside the jeep, the others waited in silence. The youngest, Kofi, gripped the small first-aid satchel in his lap, though they all knew there was a little inside that could help something this large, this wild. No pain relief strong enough. No sutures meant for skin as thick as this. Still, they stayed. Elijah walked back to the vehicle, slowly, never turning his back to the lion. He opened the side door and retrieved the canister of water. Not cold, it had sat in the sun too long, but clean. He returned to the lion's side, crouching this time carefully, not too close. The lion stirred, not with his body, only his eyes. One heavy lid lifted, and a yellow eye watched the man crouch nearby. It was not a sharp gaze, no tension, no threat, only quiet observation, dulled by pain and exhaustion. Elijah unscrewed the canister cap and poured a small stream onto the ground between them, letting it soak into the dry soil. The lion did not move. His nostrils flared faintly at the scent. That was all. From this distance, the wound was clearer. A tear along the ribs, several inches long, not clean. Possibly from a claw, maybe a bite. Infection had already started to set in. The edges were swollen, the tissue darkening. "He's been down a while," Elijah murmured. The others stepped out of the jeep, slowly, keeping a respectful distance. They positioned the vehicle between them and the horizon, using its bulk as a shield from the wind and any potential threat that might emerge from the brush. No one approached the lion. No one raised their voices. Time passed with the sun. Shadows lengthened. The heat softened. Still, the lion did not rise. They couldn't move the jeep. Not now. It offered some shade, some barriers. And if they startled him, if he used what strength he had left to flee into the bush, he wouldn't survive the night. If they stayed, there was a chance. They discussed options in murmurs. no tranquilizers, no stretcher big enough. If he panicked, someone could get hurt. If he stayed still, he might last until help arrived. It was the lion's call now. The flies returned in clusters. Elijah dipped a cloth into the water and waved it gently near the wounds, not touching. The lion grunted softly, not in protest, not in warning. Just sound. A breath made vocal. That sound struck Kofi more than a roar might have. It was the sound of something still alive, still aware. "Easy," Elijah said under his breath, barely audible. "It's okay." The lion blinked again, slowly. His side lifted, then fell. He didn't move. The sky above began to shift from white to gold. Swallows looped through the air, snapping at insects that hovered too long. The landscape remained quiet. No distant growls, no signs of another lion. This male was alone, and he had come to them not as a king, but as a creature too weak to defend himself. Every few minutes Elijah checked his breathing, watched the rise and fall, timed it, counted. The risk remained constant. Infection was spreading. Dehydration is worsening. Predators could pick up his scent. The light was leaving. But still they waited. Because he had come. Because something in him had chosen not to crawl deeper into the bush and die hidden, but to cross a road toward humans. That, alone, was enough. The lion slept, shallow and twitching, as the light turned to amber and the shadows grew long. No one left their post. By early evening, the heat had begun to thin, but the air remained heavy with dust and quiet. The lion hadn't moved. His breathing came in uneven stretches now, ribs fluttering just beneath the surface of his skin, each rising a battle, each falling a surrender. His head lay turned slightly away from the vehicle, as if even the shape of it had become too much to face. Elijah watched from the front seat of the Jeep, the door still open, one boot resting on the cracked earth below. He hadn't spoken in over 20 minutes. No one had. They were beyond words now, beyond questions or plans or reassurance. The lion's survival would depend on stillness. He stepped down again. The others shifted slightly but said nothing. Kofi tilted his head, unsure, but didn't interrupt. Elijah walked slowly, leaving his boots planted with deliberate calm. He circled around the rear of the vehicle and returned to the lion's side, this time with no water, no cloth, no tools, just his presence. He lowered himself to the ground. The lion twitched once. His hind leg kicked out slightly before returning to stillness. Elijah didn't flinch. He sat on the dirt, legs crossed, keeping a generous stretch of space between them. Close enough to hear the breath, not close enough to touch. A silent companionship. The lion didn't lift his head. Overhead, the last birds moved across the open sky, heading toward the low tree line where night would settle first. The sun had sunk behind the western ridge, leaving only its warmth in the dust. Long shadows stretched between the two bodies, man and lion, reaching in opposite directions, never quite touching. The patrol jeep clicked softly as its metal cooled. One of the other rangers turned off the engine. The stillness that followed felt deeper somehow, like the land itself had chosen quiet over motion. Elijah leaned his elbows on his knees and watched the lion's side. The tremble of breath hadn't improved. The injury, raw and torn, had begun to stiffen around the edges. It was the kind of wound that, untreated, would attract infection faster than healing. The flies had lessened as the air cooled, but a few still hovered around his mane and tail, bold in their persistence. Elijah didn't swat them away. He didn't move at all. Instead, he matched his breathing to the lion's, slow, steady, uneven. When the lion wheezed slightly on the exhale, Elijah blinked and listened. Each breath counted now. Behind them, the rest of the team remained inside the jeep. No one leaned out. No one broke the silence. It was the kind of moment rangers were taught to understand but never disturb. a moment where instinct guided more than protocol. A beetle crawled between Elijah's boots, dragging a thin line in the dust. Somewhere beyond the dry brush, a jackal yipped once, far off, not close enough to matter. But it reminded them all that the wild never stopped waiting. The lion's weakness would not go unnoticed forever. Every so often, Elijah glanced toward the horizon. The vet team was still on their way. They had radioed a second time with an updated location, just over an hour out, maybe less if the road held. Still, Elijah did not rise. The lion's ear flicked once. His eyes for a moment opened and closed again, as if registering that something remained near him. But there was no fear in it. Only dull acknowledgement. No strength for more. Elijah shifted slightly to rest one hand on the ground, palm down, fingers splayed in the dirt. He did not move it forward, he just left it there, steady, visible. Between them, the silence became something shared. If the lion panicked, stood too soon, or tried to flee, he would tear open the wound further. If he stayed down, the odds remained. Thin, but real. If he allowed them to help him later, if the vet team could reach him before dark, before shock took hold completely, he might live. The lion gave a single, soft grunt. It was barely audible, a low, strained exhale that stirred no dust and carried no threat. Elijah spoke just once. "You're not alone now." It wasn't a command. It wasn't a promise. Just a fact, spoken into the quiet. The lion didn't move, but his tail flicked once, briefly. Not in anger, not in alarm, just response. A ripple of something acknowledged. The air cooled further. The shadows deepened. Mosquitoes began to rise in small clouds, buzzing around the jeep. One of the rangers lit a stick of dried elephant dung and let it smoke near the open door. The smell curled around them, acrid and dry, keeping the worst of the insects away. Elijah remained seated. He did not expect the lion to rise. He didn't ask him to. The only thing asked at that moment was to stay, just a little longer, just long enough. The lion's breathing held, shallow but present, and so they waited, together, beside each other in the dirt and dying heat. Not as captor and creature. Not as predator and prey, just breathing, just waiting, until something shifted. By the time the sun vanished beyond the ridge, the light had turned to bruised violet, and the lion still hadn't moved. His shape blended into the earth now. Part shadow, part form, part memory of strength. From a distance, he might have been mistaken for a mound of stone or a dried carcass, but up close the details were undeniable. The raw gash along his ribs, the dull gleam in his open eye, the steady but weakening rise and fall of his chest. Elijah rose slowly from the place he'd sat all evening. His knees cracked as he stood. He hadn't spoken in over an hour. None of them had. The quiet had become its own language, full of waiting, full of restraint. He walked to the jeep without hurry, retrieving the water canister again. Its metal sides were cool now, damp with condensation. He didn't bring any clothes this time, only the water. Kofi looked up from the back seat but didn't speak. The sky was nearly black behind him, the horizon smudged with the first low stars. Insects moved through the air in soft clouds. No wind, no movement from the brush. Elijah returned to the lion's side. He stopped 2 meters away, knelt, and then shuffled forward on one knee until the water could be poured within reach. The lion did not shift. He poured carefully, creating a shallow pool in a shallow depression of earth. The liquid soaked in slowly, the soil drinking deep. The lion's nose twitched. Not much, just once. His ribs still moved, just enough to count. Elijah did not reach out. He waited, watched, let the silence do its work. After a minute, he eased slightly closer. His boots scraped lightly over dry grit. The lion's paw was fully visible now, stretched forward from the body. It was torn at the edge, near the pad, perhaps from stone or claw or something rusted and sharp. The flesh was cracked and caked with dust, but the injury was old enough to have dried some, new enough to pulse slightly at the edges. Elijah studied it, eyes narrowing. The lion's claws had remained sheathed throughout. No sign of defense, no sign of threat, only damage. A moth fluttered near Elijah's shoulder, then moved toward the lion and landed near the mane. The lion did not react. He was watching, though. One eye, cloudy now, reflected the remaining light. It did not blink. It did not fix on Elijah with tension or fear, just presence. The body had stopped trembling, not from recovery, from exhaustion. Every reserve had emptied. The heartbeat, if one placed a hand carefully along the ribs, would have been faint enough to miss. But it was still there. A thread. That's all they had left. A thread of a pulse. A thread of time. A thread of hope stretched thin against the approaching dark. Elijah shifted again. He placed the water canister down near the lion's paw, then slowly leaned back on his heels, never breaking eye contact. The lion's flank lifted, held, and dropped. Then a sound. Low. Not a growl, not a warning. Just a release of breath shaped by something more than air. A grunt. Soft. Elijah stilled. The lion's jaw opened slightly, then closed again. His eye remained half-lidded, but his breathing changed. Not faster, but deeper, as if sensing the water, the nearness, the patience. From the jeep, Kofi whispered, "Is he responding?" Elijah didn't answer. The moment didn't need words. The lion's head shifted by inches. His muzzle turned slightly toward the shallow pool of water on the ground. His nose touched the edge, and for a second he did nothing. Then his tongue flicked once. Not enough to drink, just enough to know. Elijah exhaled, the air escaping his chest like something held too long. In the distance, a low hum. Tires on dirt. The vet unit. Still far, but closer now. Maybe 40 minutes. They might make it, if the lion held, if the thread didn't break. The lion licked again, this time slower. His tongue moved across cracked lips, paused, then returned to the shallow pool. He wasn't drinking. Not yet. But he was aware. He was choosing to stay. That meant something. The stars thickened overhead, washing the dark with pale dust. The moon was late to rise, but the sky carried its weight in silence. The lion shifted once more. A slow, hard swallow. Another breath. And beside him, Elijah remained. Not touching, not commanding. Just breathing beside a beast too weak to rise, but not yet ready to fall. Elijah stayed crouched beside the lion long after the stars had multiplied above them. The shallow pool of water had mostly disappeared into the earth, and though the lion had not drunk deeply, he had responded. He had acknowledged. He had stayed. The air had cooled significantly. Each breath now rose visibly from human mouths, misting in the dark as the earth released its heat. A few crickets sang low beneath the underbrush, but even their rhythm was broken, hesitant, unsure of the stillness that hung over the road like a held breath. The rest of the team remained silent. From the rear of the jeep, Kofi had taken to marking time by tapping a finger against the side mirror every 15 minutes. None of them had moved since the vet team last checked in. Still en route. The road wasn't kind at night, especially not this far west. Elijah adjusted his position carefully, stretching one leg to relieve the pressure on his knee. His body ached in quiet, familiar ways, the way it always did after hours spent in one position waiting for something wild to decide whether or not it trusted him. The lion exhaled again, the same soft grunt as before, though slightly fuller. His breathing had steadied just enough to suggest he was still aware, still with them. But he had not lifted his head since turning toward the water. Elijah didn't try to reach him. The instinct to comfort was there, but the moment hadn't asked for that yet. He had learned long ago that offering too much could undo what patience had earned. He watched instead. I watched the rise and fall of the lion's ribs, the way the right paw occasionally twitched, the way the torn skin near the shoulder had started to tighten with the onset of shock. If the vets didn't come soon, that tightness would turn inward. The lion's strength would break before the night did. But then something shifted. The lion stirred, not in panic, not in pain, but in decision. His head lifted slowly from the ground, moving in a slow arc. Elijah did not move, though every part of him tensed instinctively. The lion's mane, crusted with dirt and blood, fell in tangled knots along his jaw as he turned. And then, with no sound, he leaned forward and pressed the side of his head against Elijah's boot. The contact was brief, startling in its clarity. Not forceful, not weak, just pressure. The weight of an exhausted creature choosing to place its head where it did not have to, against something it had been taught, for all its life, to avoid. Elijah froze. The warmth of the lion's breath bled through the thin leather. His whiskers brushed the laces. One eye remained half open, not watching, simply present. Then, after a few seconds, the lion pulled back slightly and let his head rest near the boot, not touching this time, but close enough to know it was still there. In the jeep, Kofi stood. He'd seen it. All of them had. None of them said a word. Elijah let the silence hold. He waited another full minute before he moved, slowly, with breath held, extending one open hand toward the lion's mane. Not to pet, not to own, just to offer something in return. The lion didn't flinch. Elijah's fingers brushed the outer edge of the mane, not the face, not the head, just the wiry, tangled hair where it curled near the shoulder. The texture was coarse, dusty, and warm. He didn't linger. He touched, then pulled back. The lion's breathing did not change. That was all it took. That touch, that shared stillness, that single, deliberate moment. After days, possibly weeks, of surviving alone with injuries that should have killed him, the lion had chosen to trust, if only for a breath. And Elijah had answered, not with dominance, not with intrusion, but with respect. Behind them, the faint hum of tires approached, closer this time. A long, low vehicle engine grinding over gravel. The vet unit. Less than 15 minutes out now. The others began preparing. Quiet movements, opening packs, laying out what little light they would need to guide the team in. But none of them stepped closer. Not yet. Elijah remained where he was, sitting beside the lion. Now closer than before. The gap had closed without words, without force. The lion lay with his eyes half-lidded. The stars shimmered across his back, catching in the folds of his mane. The earth around him smelled of blood and dust and something older, the kind of scent that lives in fur that's known to have too much sun and too few shadows. He was not safe, not yet. Infection still pulsed. His paw was still torn. His body is still weak. But he had not run. He had moved first. And that changed everything. The first color of morning broke across the sky in muted gray. Not light yet, but the kind of softness that lets outlines return. The jeep, the dry brush, the curve of the lion's back against the road. A faint breeze passed through the grass and touched Elijah's skin, cool and thin, like the final breath of night. The lion had not moved since pressing his head to Elijah's boot. He'd remained where he was, sides rising with shallow breath, eyes closed but not slack. Time had thickened, hour by hour, and now the waiting was almost over. Just beyond the last bend in the track, headlights appeared. Dimmed, slow-moving, careful. The vet unit. They came with little fanfare. One transport truck, a support jeep, two figures in neutral jackets stepping out with hushed precision. Elijah stood when they arrived. The movement was stiff, his knees aching from the hours crouched in the dirt. He gave a small wave. No one raised their voices. No doors slammed. Every gesture was deliberate. The vets approached quietly, carrying what they needed. Not gurneys, not cages, not force. Just a dart kit, a canvas stretcher, saline, and gauze. Then the lion stirred. Not startled, not forced. He opened his eyes, and for a few seconds there was stillness again. But not the kind that waits. The kind that listens. Elijah stepped back as the lion pushed his forearms beneath his body. The effort was slow, trembling, labored. Dust shifted beneath him. His right paw dragged slightly, his chest heaved once, then twice. The vets paused. No one moved closer. Then, inch by inch, the lion stood. Not fully. His back legs quivered, his front shoulders slumped. But he stood, all weight, all instinct, all will, pressing down through cracked pads and splintered bone. Kofi, standing near the jeep, whispered without thinking, "He's going." The lion took a step. Not away, not back into the bush. Toward the transport truck, step by step. His tail dragged behind him, tracing a line in the dirt. Each movement left another drop of dried blood, but he did not stop. His eyes stayed low. His ears flicked with each breath. One of the vets reached for the tranquilizer just in case. Elijah shook his head. "Let him," he said, voice steady. The lion passed Elijah first. Their eyes met only once, a flash of yellow and dust, a glance that carried something unspoken. Not submission, not fear, just presence. He kept walking. The ramp to the truck had been lowered in anticipation, a canvas floor stretched across it. No one thought he'd use it, but he did. His paw landed on the canvas with a soft thud. His weight sagged, but he kept moving. One step, another, and then he stopped. Halfway up, chest heaving, legs trembling. The vet nearest the ramp remained still. "Don't touch him," Elijah murmured. Another breath. The lion's body wavered. Then he took the last 2 steps. Into the crate. He did not collapse. He did not roar. He stood inside as the sun touched the eastern rim of the sky, casting thin bands of gold along the edge of his mane. Then, gently, he lowered himself to the floor. Elijah walked to the back of the truck, stopping just outside the ramp. He didn't look inside. He didn't need to. He walked it, one of the vets said quietly, as if saying it too loudly might undo it. No one replied. The wind picked up slightly, moving across the open road and stirring the brush. A pair of doves burst from the nearby acacia and disappeared into the warming air. Elijah remained still for a few more seconds, watching the horizon. They would take him now, back to the mobile unit, where fluids, antibiotics, and stitching waited. There would be days of uncertainty ahead. The infection was still real. Internal injuries couldn't yet be ruled out. But none of that lived in this moment. This moment belonged to what he chose. The lion had moved first. He had trusted me. And now, step by step, he had walked the last mile. The truck doors closed with a soft metallic click. Elijah stepped back, hands dusted with soil, boots streaked with blood. The sun rose quietly behind him.